She has smoothly steered the Indian economy through the troubled waters of the COVID-19 pandemic. At this moment of fascinating transformation for India, when India is on a mission to become a developed nation by 2047, it is she who will chart out India's growth story. An erudite straight talker whose arguments on politics and on economics are rooted in fine intellect, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman's amazing rise is a testimony to her work and ability to secure our national interests despite all odds. Here's an iconic image of the Honorable Finance Minister with a digital tablet wrapped in the traditional Bahi Khata, ready to present the budget, perhaps the most powerful image for the nation. It is the budget that she rolled out this session that has laid the foundation for the next 25 years. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that Republic Summit presents the Union Finance Minister, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, in conversation with the Editor-in-Chief, Arnab Goswami. Welcome, ma'am.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege to have Nirmala ji here with us. And I can just begin by saying that through many, many years, I have been a proud witness to her political career in the BJP, in the party, as one of its best-known spokespersons many, many years back. And now, as the Union Finance Minister, steering the country through the most difficult and the most unprecedented of times with her calm and cool demeanor and the grace with which she has led the country's economy at a time when all the doomsday prophets said, no, it couldn't be done. It won't be done. And Ms. Sitharaman knows well enough how many cynics there are in this country, but I must say, I begin by saying this, that I think we are all in awe of the manner in which you have taken the country through many, many crises over the last few years. So round of applause to Nirmala ji for that. So we have a few questions on economic trajectory. The theme is transformation, Nirmala ji. And last time when I went over to North Block to invite you, you gave me a glimpse of the functioning of the government in moments of crisis. You spoke about the decision-making during Ukraine, post-Ukraine. You talked to me a little bit about COVID. And as I walked out of North Block, I felt very fortunate to have got that glimpse. And I don't think very often we get that opportunity. And therefore, I would like you to start by giving our viewers a sense of some of the challenges that you've faced. You also spoke about the leadership of the Prime Minister in these moments. Perhaps we can start by talking about COVID, the Ukraine-Russia war, the impact, the ups and downs, the last 24 months from maybe a macro perspective, and then we'll go into the details. Nirmala ji.
Thank you, Arnab, and thank you, Republic, for having me here. All that seems to be quite some time ago, even as Arnab recites the way in which I recalled when he came to see me, the challenges of the times and the difficulties in making the decision in time for any respite or relief to be given. They're all fresh in my mind. But now it seems as though it's a bit some time ago. But it's always important to recognize that no country anywhere had a template to follow. The COVID pandemic and the way it spread across the globe didn't leave any one country free, and the rapid speed with which it caught on, leaving countries having just the lockdown as a solution and nothing else, led to a situation where no one had a formula with which you could handle the economy. So everyone was trying their best, and in the initial few months, it was very clear that you had to keep everybody together, serve everyone, make sure that people are helped, hand-holding happens. The sorrow was so intense, families could not even cremate or give a decent burial to people who lost their lives. These were not times where you knew how to handle the situation. No one knew. You had to keep everybody together and make sure whatever little help you could extend to one another, you could. And indeed, I'm very grateful, and this can be said any number of times. The people of India showed what they are capable of, helping each other at a time when the pandemic was frightening everybody out of their wits. You didn't know to whom you have to serve with one can of oxygen. You didn't know who you want to give bed to. And the discretion, no discretion existed. Everybody was calling one another saying, do you know of a hospital where I can have my relative or a friend admitted, and so on. So that's one side of the story. But in that time, during that time, to make sure that medicines are brought, the PPE kits are given, the oxygenators were ready, get all the CSR funds to go to different parts of the country which so require it. It was, I can see quite a few senior officials sitting here from the defense forces. It was like wartime operation. Everybody had to do their bit without any break, no relenting. The customs had to clear at the ports. The logistics will have to be given permit to move from one state to another, getting even food and essentials. All of us are aware of it. So there's no point in me going over it, but the sum and substance of what I wanted to say is no government had any formula with which it could handle surely for a particular type of result. So it was just, you kept going, hearing people, responding to it, and making sure the morale of all the people was being led, kept high. And in that, of course, the Prime Minister was up front there, making sure he listened to people, he communicate with the people, and talk with the states as well. So yes, there are intense moments, and also moments where you would just think, will this come to a good end at all? But you kept your spirits up and moved. And that credit goes to everybody, not just me or anybody else. So that's...
Right after COVID, there was the Russia-Ukraine war, which brought energy crisis, inflation, in some countries, a cost of living crisis. And we were facing pressures from various nations, Nirmala ji, to pick a side. Supply chains were being seriously disrupted, but we sailed through unhurt behind the scenes. What we would like to know is what were the tough decisions you had to take to make it happen. And earlier this morning, Mr. Uday Kotak was here, and he was really praising the government's geopolitical handling of the crisis. He spoke about enlightened self-interest in the context of our self-interest as a nation. Was it easy to take a decision given the various challenges that you may have had to face globally, or the repercussions thereof?
I don't know if I would describe it that way. Was it easy or was it not? No, it was clear for us that we have to take a call for India's interest. That was clear. So once you're clear on it, you knew the path in which you have to go, balancing all sides. And the sanctions were unbelievable in the sense the using of the global payment system, the SWIFT, was also not available after a point. If you were to exceed, if you were to transact with banks which have an exposure. So yes, as much as during the pandemic, even the war, we had to move carefully at each stage thinking of India's interest, whether you buy crude from Russia, whether you still import fertilizers from Russia, is it possible to get that extra drop of edible oil from the Ukrainian ports? Because sunflower oil was still being imported from Ukraine. They were one of the leading suppliers of edible oil for us. Is it possible to get that in the last minute as well? So it was like as delicately balanced as was the evacuation of our medical students and students who were studying in Ukraine. There were moments when ceasefire was in place. You could bring them through the ceasefire corridor, but after that there was no ceasefire. So the extent to which Ministry of External Affairs was interacting through various bordering countries, and ministers had gone to each one of those points where people would come getting out of Ukraine to get them to a safe place, provide them some food, and then get onto the aircrafts. As much as that was risk-ridden was this question of where do we get affordable fuel from? Do we still import the fertilizers from Russia? We need it because our farmers need it. So I thought 2019, just for a minute if I can take this discussion away, 2019, when there was a liquidity crisis in India, economy was suddenly seen slowing down. Everybody did comment about it, saying, what is the government doing? I thought that was test by fire. I didn't know, the cosmic plan that we are getting prepared for pandemic and then prepared for a war and so on. But as much as I appreciate the efforts and the entrepreneurial spirit with which people of India have come out of it and struggled to come out of it, is the clarity and the vision with which I had a Prime Minister behind, supporting each one of his ministers and making sure every now and then finding out how it's moving, if there is a need for him to chip in with any kind of assistance, or if there is a knot somewhere, would he come in to help untie it. So I think, especially now, when I went to the World Bank's meet this time, the way in which every finance minister of the G20 made a special mention of how India's earlier and well in time started efforts to digitize our economy. That came of great help. The drive with which you ensured that Aadhaar linkage, drive with which you ensured that digital public infrastructure has been taken to every sector, education, health, financial, fintech and financial services and so on. I heard, and I repeat, I heard Melinda Gates being a participant in a panel discussion which was held by the IMF on digital public infrastructure and achievements made by India. There were other eminent people on this dais. We heard Queen Maxima of Netherlands also speak at that time. In that panel discussion, in so many words, you heard Melinda Gates say, while in this country we were sitting and writing checks and posting it, many of whose check couldn't even reach them because by that time they had vacated the rental house in which they were living to either go to their parents or anybody else. So the checks couldn't reach. And she said further, while we were writing this check, India just pressed a button and money went into the account. And that together with underlining the details of it is still digital public infrastructure. It's held in public interest. Private parties are allowed to onboard it. That's why you have ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce. You have account aggregator with which you can be a customer of a particular bank, but you have a deal with some other bank because their rates are better. You can pass your data through the aggregator without the aggregator sitting over your private details, because he's only a pass-through. And it goes, and the new bank gives you the sanction. You didn't go from pillar to post. The flexibility in the financial system has all been enabled because of the digitization. So there are immense lot of achievements which have happened in the last few years, inclusive of the years which were affected by the war and the COVID. India did not miss out a chance to reform. India did not miss out a chance to reform without hurting those who are desperately in need of help. These are the things which India stands out for today. It's a new India without you having to say, we are a new India. People are recognizing you for it.
Well, I must compliment you on your hugely successful trip to the United States of America and the amount of business meetings that you did there. And for me, the image which stands out, Nirmala ji, is that of you getting off at on a commuter train station, and a picture posted by the Indian ambassador to the United States, who said it was a pleasure to receive the finance minister of India at this train station. And I think that simplicity is something we really appreciate. You know, we often would say earlier when we would travel abroad that when is it that in India ministers will travel on trains? And I just want to say this, that Ms. Sitharaman got caught in a 20-minute traffic jam before coming. And I think it was wonderful, Nirmala ji, the gesture. What I like is the lack of ostentatiousness. We speak about transformation. It's also the way the country's leaders carry themselves. The simplicity in the way they carry themselves, and I think that's absolutely magnificent. Perhaps it's a fallout of your trip that the US Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs, Donald Lu, said, I think a couple of days back it was quoted in the pink papers, that we want to be part of your economic miracle. Now, Nirmala ji, we have a top-ranking US official say, we want to be part of your economic miracle. A year back, after we took a stance on Ukraine, many people said, we've lost the plot with the West. Now, America says, we want to be part of your economic miracle. And yet, you know, Jairam Ramesh says economic growth in India has stalled. A certain economist predicted 2023 to be the most difficult year for India. Articles are written that India will not be an exception to the global downtrend. Your views on these concerns, or falsehoods, or whatever you would think of them, and how would you contrast them with the way in which the world is looking at us?
The contrast is sharp. You know, if repeatedly all of us discuss, and naturally I have been asked repeatedly this question about what are the challenges for the Indian economy, what do you think future holds for you, what are the things on which you need to plan, and so on. Yes, there are challenges which I can list out, like the way in which the recession is hitting the Western developed economies, as a result of which very many of our traditional export markets are going to be in difficulty. Our export sectors, particularly those which have been traditionally textiles or automobile parts or engineering goods or whatever, will have to find various new markets or see how best they can retain their clients and so on. There are enough and more challenges which you can speak about. But now that you specifically have asked me this, I'm tempted to answer. If external challenges exist, whether recession, price of crude, or the inflation because of the food insecurity and so on, there are also challenges which are both Indian within our domestic area and which feed into certain forces outside, which are essentially voices of the pessimists, voices of the cynics, who think, there's no good happening. I just narrated to you how the digital public infrastructure, how India is scaling up the digital goods for common people's use, are all seen as great strength for a new India. Digital achievements of India, taking it to the masses, are seen as the biggest achievement for a country of 1.4 billion population. And they ask you as to which of this will you be able to share with us, because for us, we don't need the entire stack. There could be one or two which we'll be interested. Should we come over and discuss? And they're happy that Singapore has already signed an agreement so that their system and our system can speak to each other and so on. But with all this said, the naysayers are more in India than outside. And they can speak, and they speak with such intensity, I'm not sure dedication, intensity, and they mobilize people, their old friends, I wanted to say old chums, who are all over the world, and with whom they have a old man's, old boys, old girls club.
Yeah.
And easily they serve their friends here, saying, oh my God, India is a problem. I was asked a question in Peterson, where I had gone, a think tank, where I had gone on invitation to speak about India, India's achievement. All this has been spoken, how India is the fastest growing country, despite the global situation being what it is, and so on. But the question, which was almost the conclusion, was, are Muslims unsafe in India? No. I wanted to say, come on, we've spoken so many things which are actually, based on facts, based on substantive narratives. For me, for that to become the last question, wrapping up this conversation, I felt a bit let down. Because what exactly are we talking about? So these kind of things are narratives which have been very carefully planted outside by our own people who may not like these wonderful work, wonderful in the sense, amidst challenges, great achievements being done, achieved by people of India. They don't want to recognize it only because they don't like one person who's leading the country in these troubled times and showing an achievement and making people of India proud. You're sitting now globally, you're being invited to the high table. Would you want to feel happy and proud and use it for the benefit of India, or would you deride it? That voice of derision is what is being sold abroad to some forces who repeat that to you, which is a sad thing. You should be proud that amidst all this, India is moving forward. Be a part of it, should enjoy being a part of it, not say untruth to make people think there's something wrong when there isn't one.
Absolutely, totally with you on that. When you presented your budget, Nirmala ji, this time, and your exact words with which you began your budget speech were, this is the first budget in Amrit Kal. Now, we're talking about transformation today, and I did make a promise to all those watching this morning that we would try and get you a peek into the thinking of the decision makers and leaders of this country. And you called it the blueprint drawn for India at 100. Now, within the limitations of whatever you can share, you mentioned digital, of course, could you share with our distinguished audience any of the specific milestones that remain on top of your mind in terms of projected timelines, any achievable transformations that you envisage in the coming years? Because I do want to give all the viewers of Republic and people following us a sense of the bigger picture, what this country is aspiring for. There are entrepreneurs, business persons, people who built companies in the audience. There are people from the world of defense. I'm sure they'll be inspired by getting a sense of what are those milestones that you may have kept in mind. We heard the Prime Minister almost devote 50% of his Independence Day speech to the commitment to building a Viksit Bharat, the developed country, developed Bharat. But if you can share any projected timelines in this story, please?
Well, first of all, I think when the Prime Minister set a goal of 2047 being a developed India, and for that, as I said, the first budget, Amrit Kal, and so on, I see three main areas in which India will really put all its effort so that you set the trend and also keep the momentum up. The first is that India will be an AI hub. We made an announcement in the budget that three centers of excellence will be created in institutions which are already very pioneering, so that India becomes an AI hub. You're able to find out newer tools with which life can be made better, production can be more facilitated, less monotonous, and effortlessly you can make the economy a lot more transparent. Like the way for income tax, like the way for GST, we have made sure that loopholes can be plugged by deep data, deep diving into the data using artificial intelligence. Today we are plugging all the loopholes where monies are being siphoned away without paying the proper tax. So if AI is already showing big capacities, big potential for making the economy a lot more vibrant, we should use it. And therefore, setting up the centers and making sure your goal is to make India AI hub, that's a focus area in which we'll be spending a lot of money and also attention, involving the private sector as well. Similarly, the digital applications and the stack that we've created will also have to be kept a lot more ahead of the curve. So there will be a lot of interest in that. Banking and education will become more digitized. So people, whoever, wherever they are, can pursue education with a lot more ease than searching for institutions physically next to you. Skilling is an area because our youth need skilling to be ready for Industry 4.0. There's no point in just giving them same old trade techniques, but also for them to be readily absorbable into industry and have the kind of necessary skill sets. And why do I say this? Linked to this is the fact that Indian industry today is also going through a major reset. They're not producing goods like the way they did earlier. Today there's a lot more bringing in technology, Web3 into the production techniques. The ways in which they did businesses are all changing, and for that our youth should be ready to be absorbed in jobs and not make the employer invest in time and money for them to be ready for a job. So we want to be absorb ready youth for with the necessary skill sets. So primarily these three. The one big thing that we had seen in the last 2-3 years, which was the key for India's revival, Indian economic revival, is public spending in infrastructure. That emphasis will continue because India needs a lot more inland waterways, a lot more fishing harbors, a lot more refineries, a lot more such industries which will give a futuristic look for India. So public infrastructure creation will still continue as much and more as we have now.
Ms. Sitharaman, my next two questions are linked to my own personal belief that I think, and this is what actually makes this government's policies very different from the others, in the sense that we negotiate on the basis of both our strategic and our economic strength, our demographic dividend. When we speak to the rest of the world, we speak on equal terms. And therefore, I would like to present two situations for you. Our oil deals with Russia and the dependence on the rupee-ruble exchange has dented the dominance of the dollar somewhat, and there have been enough editorials written globally about it. There are people who raise eyebrows on what India is doing, but the RBI has approved 60 requests to open special rupee Vostro accounts from 18 countries. And the RBI is quite conservative otherwise, though at the same time forward-looking. Given the shifting geopolitics of the world, do you think the rupee could play a parallel role to the dollar, if not tomorrow, then by 2047? I mean, is that a scenario you could look at as we become a $35 trillion economy by 2047?
Yes, certainly. I think even now the interest that is being shown by countries to trade in rupee, it is a really very positive sign. It is not just those countries which have a problem with hard currency. They don't have enough hard currency, so they want to deal with India and trade with India using rupee. Can be true as well. But many of the middle income countries as well are now looking for trading with India with rupee. So the potential for trading in the sense of whichever currency is remaining stable against most of the international currencies is now seen as a potential currency for trade.
Right.
And not just me, every one of us know in the last 3-4 years when there have been international challenges, if there are a few currencies which have remained largely stable, Indian rupee is one of them. Of course, with the dollar, there has been fluctuations noticeably. But with the rest of the currencies, we've been very good. It is seen now that stability in a currency's behavior is the indicator for people to choose that currency for trading in that currency.
Wow. I think, although you're very measured with your words through your, but I think it's very exciting what you've just said. I think the significant thing is that the Union Finance Minister has not dismissed my question and therefore leaves it at a very genuine possibility in the future. And I think that's remarkable. Am I reading it?
Possible to dismiss Arnab's question, be it on any topic?
Oh God, I'm missing the old days. I'm missing the old days. Oh, she was very fierce on the other side, but very well researched and the same laser sharp focus. No nonsense approach as a spokesperson. We've had some great days. The audience also misses that earlier Nirmala Sitharaman as much as we do. But Ms. Sitharaman, I love the strategic thinking in this government. And if I may say so, I'll tempt you to my second question. Ms. Sitharaman, in 1980, if you look at statistics, G7 countries was 61% of the global economy. 7 countries, 61%. That proportion has dropped to 43% just 1.5 or 2 years back. I'm just looking immediate post-COVID figures. And since then, I guess the change will be faster. Countries in the BRICS have surpassed the G7. So do you think this trend is going to see things change? We speak of the global south, multilateralism, and is there a genuine potential here economically of India being the leading player of the global south and outpacing the G7?
That the emerging economies, emerging market economies, the EMEs, are really moving fast and steadily at that is well noticed. That is why whenever of late in the G20, when India's presidency is on now, and G20 has this idea of a troika, the presidency before, the presidency now, and the presidency next are referred to as troika. G20, for the first time, the troika is made up of emerging market economies. The agenda, therefore, is lots more with voice of the South. India, of course, has made it a very clear point of agenda. But the voice of the emerging markets are the ones which are leading the G20 thought process. And as a result, you see that many of the questions which have been waiting for some discussion, whether for resolution or not, at least discussion at a table, and where voices of all sides are heard, it's happening now. So the emerging markets are showing the developed economies that we are the engine of growth, therefore we have a say in deciding how things should happen. And that's being taken without any batting of the eyelid. people are now saying that emerging markets will speak and will speak on agenda which matters to them, and we can't ignore them because they constitute a substantial part of the global trade, global economy. And that's very redeeming in a way, because when you sit there at the table, you realize the position you're being given, the voice gets heard, and there are cross-references made about what you've said when they put their points across. So I'm very proud that all of us actually are living at a time when India, as I said earlier, is being invited to the high table. The voice of India gets a good hearing and respect. And there are times when people come back to you. In fact, I would say, even on the G20, we've had one round of finance ministers and central bank governors meeting in India. One this time when we went for the World Bank meeting. A third will happen in July in Gandhinagar. And finally, the last one will happen during the autumn meeting of the World Bank. But in between will be the summit, G20 summit under our presidency. Specifically, people came to me, finance ministers came to me to say, India's G20 presidency stands out for two things. What are those two things? For the content and also the conduct. The way in which India has been running the meetings. The way in which India has received the delegates and took them to all parts of the country. 200 destinations in India are holding G20. No state has been ignored. People, G20 country members are going to all these destinations and going back to say, it's the reception which was given in Delhi or in Bengaluru, which is being replicated everywhere. Such consistency with which you're receiving the delegates, taking them to the discussion table, and the agenda and its contents are so rich. So it's not something which India is being looked for, oh, India is good for tourism, so it's good we're going to India, we can have some butter chicken. No, that's not the point. They're seeing us for what we're doing, what we are contributing to. And therefore, I'm happy to say that we are living at very interesting times. And those living in interesting times are the ones which we can carry through our life.
Ms. Sitharaman, what's your message to everyone who use controversies to say our institutional mechanism is not strong enough? I asked the question to Uday Kotak earlier this morning also, and I'm asking the question of the present controversy about a particular company. And the argument was our mechanisms are not strong enough, though the Supreme Court set up its own probe after that. But your comment on the question of institutions, and I did ask that when these big banks collapsed recently in the US, nobody made a similar argument about institutional mechanisms in that country not being strong enough.
You've answered the question in a way. Institutional mechanisms all over the world have their challenging moments. The Silicon Valley Bank, you think banking practices were completely ignored? And can a country like United States have that impression being sent about them outside? They came up with the solution so that there's no contagious spread of what had happened. Over the weekend, they came up with a solution, so Monday morning all the bankers were safe, our customers were safe. So would you imagine that such a collapse can happen in a country like United States of America? It happened. Not one, probably three. So institutions and institutional capacities are always strong till the weakest link gives in. And once that weakest link gives in, then you say, gosh, can this happen there? So India's institutions in many ways are far more known for their integrity. Regulators, you can always, like we do in most things in India, we think we know the extent to which an institution is well perfected its domain knowledge, and we still find a flaw, we would tell them, oh my God, we didn't expect this of you, which is very well. Institutions are constantly improving themselves. But it's not to say we are down in the dumps. And again, that's a typical thing on which I'm very worried. Where our institutions need to be given credit, we put that aside and only pick that one thing about that institution and say, look at this, our institutions are really now being threatened. But what about the other things which make our institutions stand out? Today, look at the way in which RBI is looked at. In fact, I would even say, people might say, why is she saying this? Is she coming in the defense of SEBI? Every one of our institutions are really doing their maximum best, world-class best. Today, our benchmarks are being looked at rather than the benchmark elsewhere. Our insurance regulator. So, institutions do have their challenging times. But India's institutions are doing their maximum best. We are not in a state of pity. And if anyone wants to live on saying, oh, our institutions are all down in the dumps, I'm sorry, either they are ignorant or they're making a political point out of it. And political points cannot undermine institutions, they undermine the assessee about the way in which they treat our institutions. I think our Indian institutions are all really doing well. There can be room for improvement, but that doesn't mean you can dump the institution saying it's worth nothing. Anyone who does that does a disservice to India.
You're taking a flight straight to Karnataka from here, and I'm very conscious of your time. But in Karnataka, the Congress is already promising freebies. AAP is a party which has sort of gone very extravagant on freebies. Are they sustainable in the long term?
Not at all. Not at all.
Are you forced to compete on that ground politically?
I hope Bharatiya Janata Party will never do that. It will not, and I'm confident. Because I think responsible finance and fiscal management is a service which every party owes to the voters.
Wow.
We cannot treat the taxpayers' money for serving our whims and fancies. If you think that by giving 200 units free, when you don't pay the Gencos and Discoms, and if you think by putting 200 rupees or 1000 rupees into the accounts of people without showing it in your budget, during COVID, even we gave money for those in the Jan Dhan accounts who need it because they can't come out of their homes because they need to buy medicines or whatever. But if you think that you're going to give money like that and have little for development, finances for developing the country or building roads and bridges or hospitals or schools, or giving health cover for people, not very responsible way of dealing with public money. They are, after all, money which is being given to you for doing concrete work. They are taxpayers' money.
Is that a tough thing to do? I mean, I've wondered this, and I'm sure this... You see, when we speak of... I think the biggest transformation in governance as far as finance ministry is concerned is the fact that I think very tough, unpopular political decisions are being taken right before elections. Or what are seen to be unpopular. Demonetization,
because,
for example.
Instance,
so how is that taken? I mean,
what
has changed?
Karnataka, I was going through the offers made by some parties. If you really do a back-of-the-envelope calculation, what they have promised till now, I don't know what they'll do it tomorrow or day after before the poll, but till now what they've offered will eat away a third of Karnataka's expenditure budget. And if that goes away, you're left with 2/3 for giving everything else, salaries, pensions, and also building roads, building hospitals, and taking care of the future of children. I'm not sure that's a very responsible way. And above all, the credentials of the party which has given such a promise, at least in 5 different other states, we have got to see, not even one of the promise has been totally fulfilled. Some few farmers have been given loan waivers, somebody else has been given some pension, a third person has been promised a pensionary retraction, which is never going to happen. So promises are there for not fulfilling, but just to put it as a carrot before the voter, so that get the vote and then forget it. So I want all of us to recognize that promises can be responsible promises, promises can be irresponsible promises as well. Look at the credentials of people who are giving the promise. If they are incapable of fulfilling it, why do we want to buy into it?
Well, two words come to my mind to describe you in this session: pragmatism and focus. And I think my takeaway from this session, personally, is absolute or the laser sharp focus in which the senior-most leaders of this government like yourself move from one task to the other. I think we are lucky to have leaders like you. Thank you, Nirmala ji. Please, round of applause for the Union Finance Minister, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Finance Minister, for that brilliant conversation that encapsulated India's economic trajectory and has filled everyone here with immense optimism for what lies ahead to unfold. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We have Sri Ravi Shankar ji here, and we'll have him join us very soon. We require you all to please be seated. Kindly keep your mobile phones in the silent mode.
RP Sanjeev Goenka Group presents Republic Summit, Time of Transformation, co-powered by Robin Group, manufacturers of electric cables and solar systems. Bharosa rakho, surakshit raho. Mind Super App and beyond. LIC, हर पल आपके साथ. Knowledge Partner, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, Education for Life, Education for Living. Infrastructure Partner, Rungta Steel TMT Bar, ekdam solid. MSME Partner, You Grow Capital. Defense Partner, Paras Defense and Space Technologies Limited, a premier defense engineering company. Healthcare Partner, Scanray, nothing is opaque. Travel Partner, Ease My Trip, take it easy. Nutrition Partner, Skirrup, the protein superfood of Vikings. Prayer Partner, Z Black 3-in-1 Premium Agarbatti, Prathana Hogi Swikar.
Amity has been ranked India's #1 not-for-profit private university for 10 years, with top 10 ranked institutions in management, engineering, biotech, law, masscom, telecom, hospitality, fashion and more. Yet another top ranking for Amity University.
With him for the last year and a half, 2 years, the way he looks at PERT charts, the way he looks at deadlines, the way he looks at execution capability, and his constant refrain that India has had multiple governments that have announced multiple schemes. We do not want to announce any more schemes. We want to make sure that the schemes that we have announced attain 100% saturation across the length and breadth of our country. And so he pushes each one of us. Where are you on that path of 100% saturation? Where are you on that path in providing capable service to our people through government schemes? And that's the fillip that civil aviation has gone through in the last 9 years. If you truly ask me, give me one word of the change of civil aviation in the last 9 years. The one word that has happened in India in civil aviation is the democratization of civil aviation. नागर विमानन का लोकतांत्रिकरण ये 9 साल में हुआ है. What was earlier seen as an elitist service, a service for a few, Prime Minister Modi has democratized that with Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik, the people that we heard about, the aspirations that were imprisoned in glass bottles. Those aspirations today, no pun intended, are actually soaring high. When people, through a government subsidized program, can fly by air